Scientist James Lovelock was intrigued. Why has Earth's atmosphere remained relatively constant over long periods of time? Just a small increase or decrease in the amount of oxygen would either set the atmosphere on fire or kill most life forms. Why has the ratio of oxygen remained at just the right level? How has the temperature range that life depends on managed to remain relatively constant? Why have the oceans maintained just the right salt concentration favorable to life? With microbiologist Lynn Margulis, Lovelock proposed the Gaia hypothesis, the idea that the entire symphony of all living things self-regulates Earth's conditions to make the physical environment more hospitable for them. You might think of it as a vast hospitality enterprise. Or, in the words of Janine Benyus, what life does is to create conditions conducive to life. Now, there is a mission statement. Of course, for millennia, indigenous peoples, the original pioneers, have held exactly this Gaian view. It's all alive, it's all connected, it's all intelligent, it's all relatives. And it's no accident that 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is on indigenous lands. Biodiversity is the very fabric of life, the cauldron of evolution and adaptation on which our own lives depend. As diversity increases, so do stability and resilience. It's also the sacred tree of life with intrinsic value and the right to life. In this sixth age of extinctions, the first caused by the human hand, we're running evolution in reverse, shattering the very mirror of nature that could teach us who we are and how to live in this place in a way that lasts. But not if Justin Winters and the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation can help it. Justin and the Foundation have devised what may be the most ambitious and strategic biodiversity conservation initiative ever done. Called One Earth, it starts from a positive vision for the world we want to see in 2050. It's a not-so-distant future when humanity and nature coexist in harmony. Instead of pockets of wilderness in a human-controlled world, envision a thriving natural landscape dotted by green cities of the future. Networks of interconnected wildlands allow biodiversity to survive the impacts of climate change, ensuring the integrity of the biosphere and a supply of clean water, healthy food, and sustainable livelihoods for the 10 billion people living on Earth by mid-century. It's a very special pleasure to have Justin Winters speak here at Bioneers today. I first connected with Justin in 2006 when I was appearing in and consulting on Leonardo's groundbreaking feature documentary, The 11th Hour, which featured about 30 Bioneers. She's been participating in Bioneers ever since. I've had the joy of watching Justin grow into the rare executive director of a large foundation who knows her first job is to listen to the people on the ground and serve what they really need. She grasps the high wire act that nonprofits face just to stay afloat. She's unwavering in her vision and her integrity. She never loses sight of the main chance. With Justin's savvy leadership and Leo's passion for the planet, the Foundation has become a truly exemplary model of respectful philanthropy married to activism. If we succeed in building climate resilience, in protecting wildlife, landscapes, and oceans, in restoring balance to our ecosystems and our human communities, Justin and the folks at the DiCaprio Foundation will have played a visionary role that held a positive vision of what we're fighting for and made a difference that really makes a difference to realize One Earth in 2050. Please join me in welcoming our dear friend who's creating conditions conducive to life, Justin Winters.
First off, thank you, Kenny. That means the world to me and to all of us at LDF and to Leo, because Kenny, Nina, Josh, and all of you in this room have served as such a source of inspiration and knowledge for us, and it's just an honor to be here with all of you. So, thank you. So, most of the world knows Leo as the film star and celebrity Leonardo DiCaprio. But Leo has been passionate about environmental issues his entire life. It started out as a deep curiosity and passion for animals and nature. He can list the top species that have gone extinct in an instant: the quagga, the thylacine, the passenger pigeon, just to name a few. I've heard him do this quite a bit. And when he was just 24, he started his foundation and immediately focused on environmental issues. Several years later, he had a pivotal conversation with Al Gore about climate change that started a lifelong interest in understanding how humanity had created this epic crisis and what we could do about it. 12 years ago, when we first started working together, we really wanted to figure out how to harness the power of his unique platform to effect positive change. Since then, we've done it in 3 ways. We wanted to figure out how to grow the movement, so we created his social and digital channels to inform, inspire, and galvanize people into action on environmental issues. Today, we have over 60 million followers. We've used key media moments to disseminate critical messages to both decision makers and the public, like his speech to the UN on climate change in 2014, and then marching with indigenous groups at the People's Climate March in Washington, D.C. Last year alone, we garnered 4 billion media impressions, and that was all with environmental messages, issues, solutions, much to the chagrin of some of his followers. And after a series of successful fundraisers, we've been able to grant out over $100 million to over 200 projects across 60 countries. Projects like securing the largest marine protected area in the world in Antarctica, projects like Global Fishing Watch, which Rebecca just mentioned, projects like supporting an alliance of grassroots groups in northern Sumatra who are working together to save the last and largest remaining rainforest in Indonesia, and helping the tribes of the Sabo Alliance in the Amazon, who you'll hear right after me, protect their lands, rights, and culture. But in the face of so much continued environmental destruction and the looming climate crisis, we, like many of you, find ourselves wondering, are the forces against us just too entrenched and powerful? Is it possible to turn this ship around? And when are we too far down the path of climate change to save ourselves? Just last week, we got some alarming but very clear information from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's special report on the state of our climate. The report assessed more than 6,000 scientific papers, with input from 91 authors and editors from 40 countries. They found that we are already seeing severe climate impacts, and that's just with 1 degree temperature rise. Texas has had its 3rd 500-year flood in the span of 3 years. In the past decade, we've seen 10 of the hottest days ever recorded. And get this, the North Pole is on track to be ice-free by next summer. The report went on to say that if we allow global temperature rise to hit 2 degrees C, it'll be much worse than previously projected. Let me paint a picture for you of what a 2-degree world looks like. It means the collapse of the world's coral reefs. They are the very nurseries of our seas. It means 10 feet of sea level rise by 2100 in some regions. It means permanent drought covering 1/4 of the Earth. And it means more than 100 million climate refugees migrating from the global south. I'm pretty sure you'll agree this is not a world that we want. And finally, the IPCC report went on to say that there is significant risks of crossing critical thresholds and even triggering tipping points if we allow the planet to warm beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius. Given this news, how does the historic climate agreement that 109 countries signed in 2015 help us? Unfortunately, right now, it falls far short. Analysis of the commitments made under the Paris Agreement show that they will ultimately lead to a world well above 2 degrees Celsius. It's clear now that if we want life, all of life, to have a future on this planet, we simply cannot allow global temperature rise above 1.5 degrees Celsius. Several years ago, we started reaching out to experts, scientists, and thought leaders to discuss what it would take to both avert a climate crisis and ensure that our natural systems can continue to sustain life. Essentially, we wanted to know if there was a plan to save the planet and ourselves. It turns out, while there's a ton of amazing research on the problems we face and an array of incredible solutions, there wasn't a clear, scientifically backed plan that made this looming crisis feel solvable. Originally, our focus was developing a global plan to protect nature, but you can't protect nature without also addressing climate change and making sure that humans have enough food and water to survive. It turns out, and this is the moment where you all get to join me, as we've heard for many years here at Bioneers, it's all connected. We commissioned research from over 20 top climate, energy, conservation, and agriculture scientists around the world and arrived at a three-pillar plan, a vision for the planet that we call One Earth, where protecting nature plays a critical role. It turns out that we can ensure that our global temperature doesn't go above 1.5 degrees Celsius if we achieve three things by 2050. We need to transition our energy systems to 100% renewable energy. We need to protect, connect, and restore 50% of our natural ecosystems on land and sea. And we need to transform our agriculture systems to regenerative and carbon-negative agriculture practices. It's an ambitious plan, but given what's at stake, what is the option? This is the moment when we, as a movement and as a people, are being asked to step up. In just a few months, the One Earth climate science model will be officially released, and it will show that this transformation is not only scientifically possible, but it is the pathway to preventing catastrophic climate change. Let me walk you through the model. And believe it or not, this is one of the most simplified graphic versions of a climate model you'll ever see, but bear with me. The gray bar that you're looking at shows us what we think is the best possible outcome of the Paris Agreement, giving us a 50% shot of keeping global temperature rise under 2 degrees C, which we now know for sure isn't good enough. Here, the turquoise bar, you can see how transitioning to 100% renewable energy by 2050 would avoid about half of those CO2 emissions, which is better, but still not good enough to reach the 1.5 degrees C line in red at the bottom. If our natural carbon sinks, represented here in the lower blue and green bar, the forests, the mangroves, the grasslands, that absorb and sequester carbon stay intact and hold up, they will absorb about half of these emissions, roughly 450 gigatons of CO2. But there's still a big gap. And that's where natural climate solutions come in as the key to solving the climate crisis. By restoring degraded forests, grasslands, and wetlands, we can absorb as much as 300 gigatons of CO2. And finally, we can completely close the gap and reach 1.5 degrees Celsius by transforming our use of working lands through practices that draw down an additional 400 gigatons of CO2 out of the atmosphere and down into the soil. Practices like better forest management, agroforestry, silvopasture, and regenerative agriculture. These strategies are being integrated together for the first time in the One Earth climate model, proving that we have the solutions now to the climate crisis at our fingertips. It was just a few years ago when everybody thought that powering the world by solar and wind was a pipe dream. Well, today, 80 cities across the US and 12 countries around the world have committed to 100% energy, clean energy. And that's due to a lot of the hard work of many people in this room. And just a few months ago, California passed SB 100, committing California to phase out fossil fuels by 2045. This is tangible proof that we can make transformative action occur quickly. Of course, much more lies ahead in realizing a full transition to 100% renewable energy by 2050. But the second and third pillars of the One Earth plan that put nature at the center of solving the climate crisis are where we need to build massive support and momentum. Several of the world's leading biologists, including E.O. Wilson and the Nature Needs Half Coalition, have stated that in order to prevent a mass extinction, we have to protect half the planet for nature. Half the planet. But the truth is, we have to protect half the planet for nature, not just to prevent an epic loss of biodiversity, but also to prevent a climate catastrophe and to ensure that we actually have a future here. If we need to protect, connect, and restore 50% of our natural ecosystems to maintain the functioning of the biosphere, then what is the actual roadmap to achieving the 50%? What 50%? Well, we decided to try to tackle that question. Utilizing the latest advances in remote sensing and computer modeling and working closely with an array of conservation biologists and computer scientists, we developed a new dynamic map called the Global Safety Net. This map depicts the world's most ecologically intact lands, along with areas that need to be restored and connected in order to allow biodiversity to survive and thrive, water resources to be protected, and carbon sequestration to be maximized. This progression from our initial safety net model shows the dark green areas that are wild and remote areas, and the rest are natural lands, including indigenous lands that have a very light human footprint and need to be kept protected from outside extractive and degrading activities like oil drilling, mining, and agriculture. This land, what we call intact nature, is really the life support system of the planet. It produces much of the oxygen we breathe, ensures water supplies for 1 billion people, and absorbs 10 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year, more than 1/4 of the total that we produce. Without these natural lands remaining intact, I'm sure you can imagine how horrific that would be. In short, we humans and much of the rest of the life on the planet would be toast. In this final slide, you're seeing the additional corridors that need to be created to connect habitat that has been fragmented by humans. These corridors are like veins, allowing nature to flow, the very movement that is key to sustaining life and building resiliency in the face of climate impacts. Just to add an anecdote, when Leo and I went to the grasslands of Nepal to see conservation in action with local communities to protect tigers and rhinos, they showed us some of the corridors that they had reforested to connect fragmented pieces of forest. And some of these corridors are no wider than a country road. So it's pretty spectacular, the highways that you can create for wildlife that really allow wildlife to thrive. As you can see, the 50% that we need to keep intact is not evenly distributed across every continent and country. There are some places, like the Amazon, that require much more protection because of their dense biodiversity and the role that they play in protecting the integrity of our biosphere. More than 90% of the Amazon has to be preserved. The Amazon is the world's biggest carbon sink, storing and removing vast amounts of carbon from the atmosphere. And it also serves as one of the planet's most vital hydrological systems. If it becomes degraded, millions of people will lose access to water, and our climate system would be in far deeper peril. So next up, I'm going to share with you something that nobody else has seen yet. It's an initial pass of the Global Safety Net, and there will be many more iterations of this, but I thought that this crowd would really appreciate seeing what the world would look like if we protected 50%. So the various shades of green that you see are those different levels that I was explaining. Each piece of this map is home to a diverse array of life: plants, animals, people, communities, families. We all need to hold a vision of a restored and vibrant planet within us to make this vision a reality. We're working with a team of marine scientists on the layers of data that needed to be added in for the oceans. So you can imagine what a completed image on land and sea of the global safety net would look like. Once this is completed, it will be able to be used to create scenarios to articulate the social and economic benefits of protecting nature at the local and national levels, showing just how important it is for people to protect our natural systems. With the completed global safety net and a series of related scientific papers that we are funding and coordinating with a group of committed scientists, we hope to provide the scientific case for building public and political will to protecting 50% of the planet's natural systems in the lead up to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity that will take place in Beijing at the end of 2020. The Convention on Biological Diversity, which along with the Climate Convention was established at the Rio Summit in 1992, is meant to ensure the protection of natural ecosystems. Though the convention has fallen short thus far, there is an opportunity to rally the world's governments around a new global deal for nature when they agree to new targets to protecting nature at the end of 2020. Some people have said that we can't protect 50% unless we have more land for agricultural expansion. We believe that the opposite is true. We simply won't be able to feed 10 billion people unless we protect 50%. Why? Because the carbon emissions associated with losing any more of our natural lands could put us well over 2 degrees C. If we allow global temperature rise to hit 2 degrees C, we'll be faced with permanent drought in many regions, flooding, and vanishing water supplies on all 5 continents. Without water, there's no food. Without food, there's no life. But if we realize the 50% vision of the global safety net, we can preserve natural ecosystems which collect and deliver water to 1 billion people. How can we feed 10 billion on the current area under agriculture management if right now we're barely managing to feed 7.5 billion people? Several studies show that it is indeed possible, and that the solutions that make it so would not only increase the quantity of our food, but also the quality. Did you know that last year we grew enough food for 10 billion people, but because of huge inefficiencies in our food system, more than 40% of that food was wasted? We're now examining 30 strategies to increase both nutrition and food availability without increasing the footprint of agricultural lands. But here are a few of the top solutions. We have to eliminate biofuel crops. A football field of corn for ethanol powers 3 cars per year. A football field of solar panels can power nearly 300 cars. We have to reduce as much waste as possible from the global food system, and this means more locally grown food delivered to local markets. We have to cap meat production and shift to plant-based diets. There is a growing demand for meat in the developing world, which means Americans and Europeans in particular need to eat a lot less red meat. We have to end overfishing. By protecting 50% of the oceans, we can ensure continued healthy populations of fish for the billions of people that depend on seafood as a major source of nutrition. And finally, we have to shift away from industrial-scale agriculture and prioritize smallholder farms. Small farms produce 80% of the world's nutrition, while industrial farms produce only 20%. On an area twice the size. In short, small farms produce more foods. We need way less monoculture. Clearly, the massive challenges we face, climate change, loss of biodiversity, feeding the world, access to water, cannot be solved in a silo. The solution requires us to see the biosphere and our role in it as a complete system. How many of people know what this map is? Nobody. Wow. We're used to seeing the world divided up by country boundaries, but this is a map of the world drawn by Mother Nature. Each of these colors is a different ecoregion. In short, an area of common communities of biodiversity. In many ways, it's similar to our human maps, but from the plant and animal kingdom perspective. The ecoregions, Mother Nature's map, is the organizing principle behind our global safety net. It's vital and long overdue to respect nature's systems and to use nature's map as the very basis of our plan to protect the biosphere. We worked with a group of scientists to group these ecoregions into 190 bioregions, clusters of ecoregions that need to be thought of together. Imagine the radical collaboration and transformation that could happen communities, indigenous groups, organizations, government, and business working together to develop a plan to protect an adequate amount of nature in their bioregion, in tandem with developing a plan to transition to renewable energy and transform the agriculture systems. Together with leading scientists, experts, committed individuals, and communities, we're building a strong scientific foundation and powerful tools for the world that we know is possible. The science and tools are not enough. At its core, One Earth is a new vision for the future that stands in stark contrast with the doom and gloom scenarios that dominate public discourse. It's understandable that some would think that painting a bleak picture of the reality of climate change is what's needed to change hearts and minds. But this approach hasn't worked. People feel depressed and overpowered by the magnitude of the problem. We're taking a different approach. We believe that a global transformation can happen if people around the world are inspired by a clear vision, a North Star for the movement that connects and tells the stories of the individuals and organizations who are implementing tangible solutions in their own communities, linking local action to global impact. A different future is possible. We can avert a climate crisis, protect our biosphere, and create a world where both nature and humanity coexist and thrive. Part of making the transformation possible is giving yourself the space to imagine what our world could be. Take a moment, right here, right now, to connect to the earth under your feet and the air that you breathe. Connect with all the energy that flows through your heart and your mind. Honor all the life that has come before, that is here now, and that can thrive far into the future. You are the fierce protectors of each other and our home. You were born into this time because you have the strength and the capacity to turn hope into action. You are the transformation. You and we, together, and with nature at our backs, have the power to do this. Thank you so much.